They thought she was just another maid in a Navy uniform, someone to blend into the background, mop bucket in hand. But in less than a minute, a single phone call in a language no one expected would shatter 6 years of invisibility and set off a chain of events that would shake the walls of one of Manhattan's most luxurious hotels. Before we dive in, if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, take a second to share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear if you've ever seen hidden talent go unnoticed. Hit that share button so more people can see what's possible, and subscribe to Poetic Justice Stories so you don't miss the next tale that might just change the way you see the world. The Grand Plaza Hotel glowed like a polished jewel that late afternoon. Crystal chandeliers bathed the marble lobby in warm golden light, while the quiet hum of conversation drifted from the corner lounge where wealthy guests sipped champagne. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the towering floral arrangements. Every surface gleamed, glass, brass, stone, like they'd been buffed just for the day's high-profile arrivals. Pushing a yellow mop bucket across the expanse of white marble, Zoe Johnson moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to blend into the background. At 29, she wore the crisp navy uniform of the cleaning staff, white piping along the collar, short sleeves, and the ever-present yellow gloves. Her posture was straight, her expression composed, but behind the calm mask was a mind that spoke 6 languages and had graduated summa cum laude in linguistics from Georgetown University. 6 years of working here, and not one day had brought her closer to the career she'd trained for. As she wiped down the base of a column, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Zoe froze. Rule number 1 from manager Sarah Richards: no personal calls while on duty, ever. That rule didn't seem to apply to the white receptionist who often giggled over calls from boyfriends in plain view of guests. But for Zoe, the consequences had always been swift and merciless. She almost ignored it until she saw the name on the screen. Her breath caught. University of Amsterdam. It had taken 6 failed attempts to secure a scholarship for her master's program there. She'd nearly given up after the last rejection letter. Her hand trembled as she stepped discreetly behind the wide column, shielding herself from view. "Zoe Johnson," she answered softly. The voice on the other end spoke in flawless Dutch, Professor Van Ton, head of the admissions committee. Without hesitation, Zoe's reply slipped out in the same language, her pronunciation crisp, fluid, and unmistakably native-sounding. They dove into a rapid-fire conversation about her application, scholarship deadlines, and a missing motivation letter. Her mind raced through formal phrasing, cultural nuances, idioms she'd picked up during her exchange year abroad. She wasn't just speaking Dutch, she was inhabiting it. And for a few blissful moments, she forgot she was standing in a hotel lobby in rubber gloves, just another uniformed maid on the payroll. The spell broke with a sharp shadow falling across her. Zoe glanced up and her heart lurched. Standing only a few feet away was Richard Coleman, the billionaire owner of the entire Grand Plaza chain. Immaculate in a tailored charcoal suit, his expression was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on her with the kind of scrutiny that felt like it saw through more than her uniform. Beside him, manager Richards was already scowling, lips pressed into a thin line. Zoe turned away slightly, forcing herself to finish the sentence in Dutch. "Ik bel je later terug, Professor. I'll call you later, Professor." She hung up quickly, pulse hammering. "Johnson, my office. Now." Richard's voice cut through the lobby like a blade. As they walked toward the service elevators, Zoe could feel eyes on her. Some co-workers glanced over with pity. Others smirked, almost satisfied. She was the only black woman in the cleaning department with a college degree, a fact Richards had never once acknowledged except to use as a punchline. The basement office smelled faintly of bleach and old paper. Richards didn't bother sitting down before starting. "You know the rules, Johnson. No calls during work hours, especially not in public areas." "It was important," Zoe said carefully. "And what was that language?" "French." Richard's tone dripped with condescension. "Dutch," Zoe corrected before she could stop herself. Richard's eyes narrowed. "I don't care if it was Martian. What I care about is that Mr. Coleman, the owner of this hotel, saw a cleaning lady ignoring her duties to chat on the phone. Do you have any idea how that makes us look?" Zoe bit the inside of her cheek. tasting the familiar bitterness of injustice. Receptionists took personal calls daily without a whisper of discipline, but she already knew the pattern. She'd seen it for 6 years. Starting tomorrow, you're on convention center bathrooms for the next 3 months, Richards announced. You can practice all the languages you want there without embarrassing the hotel. Zoe's stomach twisted. That was Richard's signature punishment. Back-to-back cleaning shifts after massive corporate events, no overtime pay. As she stepped back into the service hallway, head bowed, she almost missed a tall figure lingering at the far end. Richard Coleman was there, watching her quietly. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his gaze, a flicker of curiosity, maybe even respect, that didn't fit the cold billionaire persona she'd seen in news articles. For the first time all day, Zoe felt a strange shift in the air. Something told her this wasn't over. The next morning, Manhattan was still shaking off its dawn haze when Zoe clocked in for her shift. Determined to keep her head down after yesterday's humiliation, she'd polished her shoes, pressed her uniform until the seams were sharp, and tied her hair back into a perfect bun. The Grand Plaza's lobby was already alive with the quiet efficiency of wealth, valets gliding past with luggage, receptionists murmuring into headsets, the scent of fresh orchids drifting through the air. She was heading toward the service elevator when Jennifer, the head receptionist, called out from the front desk, "Zoe Johnson? Human Resources wants you upstairs right away." Zoe froze mid-step. Upstairs, not to the mid-level offices where laundry schedules were typed up, but top-floor HR. That was where the executive suites were. The territory of board meetings, corporate lawyers, and million-dollar negotiations. Housekeeping staff didn't go there unless something extraordinary or catastrophic was about to happen. The elevator ride felt like an ascent to another world. Each passing floor peeled away the sounds of clattering carts and vacuum cleaners, replacing them with muted conversation and the click of expensive shoes on polished floors. When the doors opened, she stepped into a reception area bathed in natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan's skyline sprawling like a painting beyond the glass. The HR director, a poised woman in a slate-gray suit, stood waiting. "Mr. Coleman would like to see you," she said without preamble. "Please follow me." Zoe's pulse spiked. Mr. Coleman? The billionaire owner himself? His office was larger than her entire apartment. Walnut panel walls, a leather sofa near the window, an imposing desk that looked like it had been carved from a single block of dark oak. Behind it, Richard Coleman stood reviewing a folder. He didn't look up right away, but when he did, his gaze was sharp and assessing. Dutch, French, Italian, Mandarin. Correct. His voice was direct, the tone of someone used to getting precise answers. Zoe blinked. "Yes, sir," in Spanish and Portuguese. Coleman tapped the folder. "Honors degree in linguistics from Georgetown. 6 languages, 2 of them Asian. And you've been cleaning my hotel rooms for 6 years." She shifted in her chair. "I applied for other positions here. Many times. None went through." "I know." He closed the folder, leaning forward. "I had HR pull your entire employment file after what I heard yesterday." For a moment, silence pooled between them. Heavy but not hostile. Then he said, "Tomorrow morning, we host a trade conference with executives from the Netherlands and China. I need someone fluent in both languages, someone who can navigate cultural nuance, avoid diplomatic missteps, and represent this hotel with intelligence and professionalism." Her brow furrowed. "And you're asking me to clean their rooms?" A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No, Ms. Johnson. I'm asking you to serve as International Relations Coordinator for the duration of the conference. Temporarily. 1 week. Salary is $5,000 a week, starting today." Zoe's breath caught. That was more than she made in 3 months. "Why me? There must be other qualified candidates." "Because I heard you speak Dutch like a native. Because you have the academic credentials I need. And because," his eyes narrowed slightly, "I suspect there's something very wrong in how this hotel handles talent like yours." She hesitated. Every instinct warned her this could be a trap, a setup to embarrass her further. But there was something in his voice, a measured conviction, that made her want to believe him. Zoe straightened her shoulders. "All right, I'll do it. Coleman nodded once, decisive. You'll need a new badge, access to conference floors, and a proper wardrobe. HR will handle the paperwork. As she left the office clutching her temporary ID card, her reflection caught in the elevator's polished steel. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing the invisible armor of the housekeeping uniform, and she wasn't headed back to scrub floors. She had no way of knowing that this shiny new badge was her ticket straight into the heart of a corruption scheme that had been festering in the Grand Plaza for years, one that would test every ounce of skill, resolve, and courage she had. The transformation from cleaning staff to international relations coordinator happened so fast that Zoe barely had time to process it. One moment, she was scrubbing marble baseboards. The next, she was walking to the Grand Plaza's executive corridors with a tablet in her hands and a temporary office badge clipped to her blazer. The conference preparation room occupied an entire wing of the mezzanine floor. It was a hive of activity. Assistants rushing with stacks of documents, technicians adjusting translation headsets, catering staff laying out silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. The walls were lined with banners in English, Dutch, and Mandarin, welcoming delegates from 2 continents. Zoe had just finished a round of polite introductions with the Dutch delegation's advance team when a thick packet of conference materials was set on her desk. Final translations, the event coordinator said, before vanishing back into the chaos. She flipped through the Mandarin section out of habit. Within seconds, her stomach tightened. Entire phrases had been rendered in ways that were technically correct but culturally tone-deaf, using colloquial idioms in context that demanded formal respect, mistranslating financial terms in ways that could imply loss rather than profit. One phrase in particular jumped out, a direct translation of joint venture that, in Mandarin business culture, carried undertones of exploitation. If those documents went to print, they wouldn't just cause confusion. They could insult the Chinese executives outright. A low voice interrupted her thoughts. You caught that, didn't you? Zoe looked up to see Richard Coleman standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets. Yes, she said carefully. The previous translation. It's not wrong in grammar, but it's wrong in meaning. Whoever did this doesn't understand the cultural nuance. Coleman's eyes flickered. These cost us a fortune. Whitmore, director of operations, assured me we had the best translators on retainer. Then either he didn't check their credentials, or he doesn't know the difference, Zoe replied before she could stop herself. Instead of looking offended, Coleman's gaze sharpened, as if she just confirmed a suspicion he'd been carrying. You're fluent in Mandarin as well? Zoe nodded, fluent and certified in professional translation. Twice. He gave a short nod. Fix it. Quietly. She spent the next 2 hours rewriting the Mandarin sections, cross-checking every term against her own professional glossary. The hum of the conference prep faded into the background as she worked, her focus absolute. She barely noticed Coleman lingering in the doorway for several minutes, watching the speed and precision of her pen. By the time she finished, the new version was cleaner, sharper, and diplomatic landmines had been defused. She sent the corrected files to the print team with an urgent tag. Later, as she stepped out for a quick coffee, she passed 2 catering staff gossiping near the service corridor. Their voices were low, but she caught the names Whitmore and Richards, followed by the word nephew and something about that translation contract. She slowed her pace, letting their words drift toward her. Told you it's all in the family. No, one of the bills are triple the market rate. And yet they got qualified people like her scrubbing toilets. Zoe's heart pounded. She'd suspected discrimination here for years, but nepotism on top of it, and tied directly to the conference she was now helping run, that was bigger than she'd imagined. That night, she stayed late under the pretense of organizing name tags. In reality, she was quietly pulling every translation file from the last 3 years out of the hotel's shared system, copying them to a secure folder on a USB drive she kept tucked in her blazer pocket. Something told her these mistakes weren't accidents, and if she was right, the wrong people were making a lot of money off them. She just didn't know yet how dangerous that knowledge would become. The first day of the trade conference unfolded like a meticulously staged performance. The Grand Plaza's grand ballroom had been transformed into a gleaming showcase, silk banners cascading from the high ceilings. the scent of imported lilies mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Every table laid with precision down to the placement of the chopsticks for the Chinese delegation. Zoe moved among the guests with a calm grace that belied the storm of thoughts in her head. In a tailored navy suit, she no longer looked like the invisible maid she'd been for 6 years. She switched effortlessly between Dutch and Mandarin, smoothing over a moment of hesitation between delegates, translating cultural subtleties that turned awkward silences into easy laughter. During the morning session, a tall man in a charcoal suit approached. Thomas Whitmore, director of operations. His smile was polite, but his eyes carried the weight of condescension Zoe had seen too many times. "Miss Johnson," he said smoothly, "I'm impressed. Manager Richards clearly underestimated you." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore," she replied, her tone even. "It's impressive how my resumed listing fluency in Mandarin went unnoticed for 6 years, especially when a hotel spent $50,000 on inadequate translations for this very conference." His smile faltered just slightly. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. I never saw your resume." "I have email confirmations for all 47 submissions," Zoe said quietly, "including the ones pointing out critical translation errors for previous Asian events." Whitmore's gaze hardened, but he said nothing. Instead, he shifted back into a practiced smile before excusing himself. By mid-afternoon, Zoe's suspicions grew sharper. A junior staffer accidentally left a folder on the refreshments table, its bold label reading, "Final translation, master contract." Out of habit, Zoe glanced inside. Her stomach sank. The Mandarin text was riddled with the same diplomatic blunders she had corrected 2 days earlier, phrases that could derail the negotiations entirely. And at the bottom of the document was a signature, Ashley Whitmore. Her mind clicked into place. Whitmore's niece, the translator, who'd been quietly profiting from inflated contract for years. This wasn't incompetence. It was a scheme. That evening, Zoe waited until the conference rooms emptied. She copied the flawed contract onto her USB drive, then photographed the invoices showing the hotel paying triple the market rate for Ashley's work. It was more than enough to expose the fraud, if she could get it into the right hands. The trap was set, but Zoe knew she was walking a thin line. One wrong move, and she could be out the door before the truth saw daylight. What she didn't know was that Whitmore had already noticed her interest in the files, and was preparing a trap of his own. The second morning of the conference began with a nervous buzz in the air. Contracts were due to be signed before lunch, and every conversation seemed to carry an undercurrent of urgency. Zoe stood near the edge of the ballroom, scanning the sea of suits, watching Whitmore work the crowd with his usual smooth confidence. She wasn't fooled. In the inner pocket of her blazer was the USB drive holding every piece of proof she'd gathered, flawed translations, inflated invoices, hiring records, and most damningly, an email from Peking University confirming they had never issued a certification to Ashley Whitmore. Halfway through the morning, Whitmore made his move. He strode into the VIP lounge, where Zoe was finalizing notes for the Dutch delegation, holding the final translation, master contract folder she'd seen yesterday. "Miss Johnson," he said with a controlled smile, "there have been some inconsistencies in your translation. I've already replaced it with a more reliable version." Zoe looked him dead in the eye. "You mean the version with critical errors that could cost us millions? The one your niece wrote?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Careful. You're on thin ice here." Before she could reply, Richard Coleman appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Thomas, Zoe, my office. Now." Inside the CEO's corner office, Zoe laid out her evidence with clinical precision. Screenshots, email confirmations, payment records, and side-by-side comparisons of the correct and incorrect translations. As she spoke, Coleman's jaw tightened. Whitmore tried to interject, but Coleman cut him off. "Thomas, I'm looking at payment records showing $50,000 for translations that a competent bilingual student could have done for a fraction of the cost. And all while qualified employees, like Dr. Johnson, were cleaning bathrooms." Whitmore's voice sharpened. "She's a cleaning lady who thinks." Ph.D. in applied linguistics from Georgetown, Zoe said calmly, sliding the proof across the desk. 6 international publications. and every credential on file with HR. Coleman leaned back, his decision already made. We'll take this to the board. Now. Within the hour, the executive auditorium was filled with managers, department heads, and a handful of curious conference delegates. Coleman took the stage with Zoe beside him. Today, he began, we uncovered a systematic scheme of nepotism and discrimination that has cost this company millions and damaged our credibility. Thomas Whitmore, our director of operations, has been found responsible for hiring unqualified relatives for essential roles while rejecting qualified candidates, often on the basis of race and gender. Gasps rippled through the room. On the screen behind him, a presentation displayed damning graphs. Qualified minority applicants rejected at triple the rate of others, bloated vendor payments to Ashley Whitmore's translation firm, and documented errors in high-value contracts. As of this morning, Coleman continued, Thomas Whitmore is terminated for cause. Manager Sarah Richards is suspended pending further investigation into her role in these practices. Then he turned to Zoe with a small, genuine smile. It's my privilege to announce that Dr. Zoe Johnson will assume the role of Global Director of Internal Communications, overseeing all multilingual operations for our international properties. The applause began in the back, from the cleaning staff, and swelled until the entire room was on its feet. Some clapped cautiously, others with open relief, but from the crew in Navy uniforms, it was fierce and unrestrained, tears shining in their eyes as they watched one of their own rise. Whitmore sat frozen in his chair, his face a mask of rage as security approached. As he was let out, Zoe caught his final muttered words. You won't last a month. She only smiled, her fingers brushing the small recorder in her pocket, a device that now held every veiled threat he'd made in the last 2 days. 6 months had passed since that electric day in the auditorium, and the Grand Plaza's 32nd floor now housed an office with a simple brass plaque. Dr. Zoe Johnson, Vice President, Diversity and International Relations. From her window, Manhattan stretched endlessly, a reminder of how far she'd come from pushing a mop across the marble lobby below. But Zoe hadn't taken promotion just for herself. Her first act as VP was launching the Invisible Talents program, an internal initiative to identify employees with overlooked skills and place them where they could thrive. She'd spent weeks visiting properties across the country, holding open forums, and listening to staff who had never been asked what they were capable of. The results were staggering. In 6 months, the program identified 147 employees with skills in languages, finance, and technology who were stuck in positions far below their qualifications. 83% of them were Black, Latino, or from other minority backgrounds. Outsourced translation costs dropped by 78%. International client satisfaction rose by 42%. And perhaps most importantly, the company's diversity ratings shot to the top of the industry. At a quarterly board meeting, Coleman leaned over and whispered, This is exactly what I hoped for when I hired you. No, better. Not everyone was celebrating. Sarah Richards now managed laundry at a struggling hotel in California. Her old authority reduced to folding linens in a back room. After avoiding termination, she'd been quietly reassigned, a daily reminder of the opportunities she'd once denied others. As for Thomas Whitmore, no luxury hotel would touch his resume. Rumor had it he was working nights at a roadside motel in Arizona, his name forever tied to allegations of discrimination and embezzlement. His niece Ashley had been forced to repay the inflated fees, complete an ethics program, and, ironically, was now studying Mandarin on a scholarship funded by the Coleman Foundation for Inclusive Language Education. Zoe's office phone buzzed. The restructuring committee is ready for you, said Zoe Williams, her executive assistant and one of the first beneficiaries of the Invisible Talents program. In the conference room, Zoe addressed regional managers across the chain via video. She outlined the next phase, a mentoring system where every promoted employee would commit to finding and supporting others with hidden potential. The applause from the call was immediate and genuine. When the meeting ended, Zoe lingered at the head of the table. When I was a girl, she began, speaking to the few executives still in the room, my mother worked as a maid in a hotel like this. She had a degree, but never got a job in her field. She used to tell me, No matter how invisible they try to make you feel, your worth isn't decided by them. Her voice softened. She never lived to see this moment, but I know she'd be proud, not because of the title, but because the doors we've opened will stay open for the ones who come after us. Later that afternoon, a courier delivered a package to her office, a postcard from Amsterdam and a letter from the University of Applied Linguistics offering her a visiting professor position. It was from Professor Van Ton, the man who had made that fateful call in Dutch. As she set the letter down, she couldn't help but smile. If Richards had only given her a warning that day, she might still be cleaning the same rooms, her degree gathering dust. The next morning, Zoe announced the creation of a scholarship fund for hotel employees and their children, seeded with part of her own salary. The first recipient was the daughter of a housekeeper who had worked beside her for years, a girl who dreamed of studying hospitality management. What had started as a phone call in Dutch had become a ripple that transformed not just one career, but an entire industry. And Zoe's sweetest victory wasn't watching her adversaries fall. It was seeing hundreds of others rise. Long after the applause in boardrooms faded and the headlines about the Grand Plaza's transformation moved on, the quiet changes remained. Somewhere in a small Midwestern town, a former hotel dishwasher was now running an accounts department. In a bustling Florida resort, a single mother who once folded sheets at midnight now greeted guests in 3 languages at the front desk. And in hotels she would never visit, people Zoe would never meet were telling her story. Not in grand speeches, but in hushed, hopeful tones to new hires. You know, once there was a maid who spoke Dutch in the lobby and everything changed. It wasn't just her victory. It was a seed, carried by others, taking root in places she could only imagine. If Zoe's journey stirred something in you, tell us in the comments. What hidden talents have you seen overlooked, and how would you open the door for them? Share this story so more people can believe that even the smallest act can start a revolution. And if you want to hear more true-to-life tales of dignity, justice, and transformation, subscribe to Poetic Justice Stories, where every story proves that the overlooked are never powerless.